Welcome to the Work in Progress podcast, where we keep our whip in check. And now, here's Michelle, certified coach and founder of Strive Leadership Development.
Welcome to the Work in Progress podcast. I am so excited to introduce my guest today. And if you haven't already recognized her, Jamie has been on the podcast in the past, and it was time to bring her back. This is Jamie Flora with Jamie Flora and Associates, and she is an executive career coach and a good friend of mine. And we have spent so much time together being able to talk about what's happening in workplaces and in companies. And it's so exciting and interesting to watch the trends of everything that's happening. So it's now been a couple of years since we last shared her wisdom with you. And lately, Jamie and I have been talking and we said, okay, it's time to come back on the podcast and share what's going on now. So welcome to the podcast, Jamie. So excited to have you.
Round two, ding.
Yes. I love it. I love it. So, only a few things have been changing over the past couple of years, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, the markets have all shifted so much. Industry has shifted so much. Employers and cultures have shifted dramatically, and what employees want has shifted very dramatically. So what are some common themes? Like, as a good opener, what are the common themes you're hearing from your end? Because you're working with people who are ready to make changes. They want to make a change. So what are you hearing from them? What's the word?
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, it's interesting to be in this season, right, that we're in right now. It's summertime. I don't know if that's okay to date the podcast, but it's summertime.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people are traveling. And so it's a little chaotic, to be honest. But at the same time, not only is it like the season that we're in, but we are entering into a recession. We've been talking about this for a while. And I will tell you, as an executive career coach who is focused on getting people jobs, I've already been behaving as if the recession is here, because for months I have been meeting with people who are getting laid off. And so there's a lot of quiet layoffs happening. There's big layoffs that you're seeing in the news, like Amazon or 3M if you're local to Minnesota here. But there's a lot of quiet layoffs happening too, where companies are strategically laying off or doing reductions in force in smaller bits, basically to stay out of the media, not to be in the limelight with all the others. So
Okay.
I think for people being laid off, the feeling that you can feel is kind of chaotic or kind of lost at sea, if you will, like, well, what do I do now? So you combine all of these layoffs with just like the natural summertime vibe of we're traveling, things are loosey-goosey, the kids are out at school, like routines are all up in the air. And it just kind of makes for it's been a really interesting summer working with people.
Yes, I can only imagine. So are a good majority of your clients right now in that layoff position and they're trying to find their next opportunity then?
I would say half and half.
Okay.
I mean, there are some weeks where I'll have a free meet and greet with, let's say 9 prospective clients and 6 of them are laid off. So that's becoming more and more the trend. But I would say as far as clients go, probably about half and half. The other half are, they have experienced, maybe they haven't been laid off, but they've had a lot of leadership changes, a lot of people changes, a lot of leadership changes. And all of a sudden they're looking around the room and they're like, I am totally not aligned with this company and the leadership. And I'm so burnt out, overwhelmed by the amount of change that I've been going through. I mean, I get chills thinking about it because I just met with a woman this week and she's like, an entire leadership layer got wiped out, was kind of like the vernacular I believe she used. And you think about that and you're just like, wow, okay, that's great. Companies flattening, leadership, sometimes more simple organization structure can be better.
Right.
But still, as a human who has thoughts and feelings, And you find yourself in that circumstance. And if you're finding yourself in that circumstance time and time again, those feelings of burnout and overwhelm, either just from the amount of change, or now you're being assigned things that weren't maybe your job. And you're now finding you have to advocate for yourself in a new way. So that can either have people dig their heels in and say, all right, I'm going to figure out a way how to exist here. Or they feel like it's such a misalignment that they're going to look externally. That's kind of what I feel like I'm working with these days.
The struggle. It's so funny you're saying that, because the clients I'm kind of on the other side. Most of the time I'm working with the corporations and the people within them. And there's been so much hiring over the past 2 to 3 years with the market and growth going insane and crazy, that they've put people into positions who maybe weren't quite ready yet, and they weren't quite trained yet, and they didn't really have a lot of support because things were moving so quickly. Yeah. And so there's a team struggle, a human struggle when that happens. And it's good to acknowledge that that's what we needed to do back then. But now what do we do? Now, how do we rectify that? Either when we have to reduce the number of people, how do you deal with that effectively? And if you're not going to reduce force, you still have all these people who need support and resources and who are still overwhelmed and burnt out. So how do you manage that? So you're right. It's kind of across the board right now. Going on.
Yeah, it just feels like a lot of it does feel, again, kind of chaotic, like a lot of movement. And the phrase while you were talking that came to mind, and I know we've all heard it as leaders, right people, right role. I've even experienced this in my business. My business has grown tremendously in the last 6 months. And I put out a position for an operations manager. And I said, hey, it'd also be nice if you could do all these other things, which were what my marketing coordinator and kind of executive assistant or virtual assistant was doing. And I hired someone for that role thinking, okay, great. We can do this. We can have these two functions within this role, right? This person had the capability. And then it just came down to a time thing. It's like time. And then also I found that the marketing coordinator, that was the stuff that was keeping the lights on in the business. It was almost like the must have, and the operations manager became a nice to have. And we rolled together for 6 months before it was just like, this is a misalignment in the time that person had to give to the business. And I feel horrible because I wasn't able to ever get her into the role that I hired her for, because we were triaging basically this other role where my former assistant left because she was pregnant with twins, which is so fun. But we needed to backfill her role. So I think we see that's at a micro level in my small business, but I think we're seeing that in corporations as well, when there is so much shifting, like you were saying, people are taking on roles that they weren't hired for. And so now what?
Well, you're saying right position, right person, right role.
Right role. Yeah.
And even before that, for companies, what I tell them is, what are the roles you even need? First, let's make sure you even know clearly what the roles are. And before you're even thinking about who is right for those seats. Yeah. But if you've got a bus, make sure that you've got the right butt in the right seat. So
I think the struggle for a lot of leaders, especially if you're middle management, you're getting a lot of pressure to probably move fast, right? Yes. And then also as a CEO in a small business, everybody directly reports to me. So we're constantly moving fast. That's the nature of the game, right? So if you're moving fast and you're not taking that time to slow down, I feel like I was fortunate. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Can you hear that, or is it just me?
No, I can hear you. I heard a noise, but all is well.
It seems like it evened out. Okay. So in my situation where I had hired this operations manager, it took me basically 5.5 months, right up until we had the discussion of what do we do here? And then ended up parting ways, to realize, oh shoot, she's doing all this other stuff that I actually need to hire somebody else for. And that it stinks. It stinks that was the experience. Obviously, she crushed it in that marketing coordinator role, but again, it wasn't what I had hired her for. And so I didn't get to see her fully step into that operations manager. So I was left feeling what else could have been? Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
But again, sometimes you're moving so fast, you don't really know what you need until hindsight, until you reach that hindsight. And I think that happens a lot in companies as well. They're moving fast, they have bodies, they're moving those bodies around, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, now what?
Yes.
It's like triage, you're in triage mode,
Yes,
versus
totally.
planning.
I just had a conversation with one of my corporate clients this morning, and that the decision they're making next year is just stop with all the band-aids. Stop just trying to fix it in the quick ways, the let's keep going fast ways. And there is a time for that. There is definitely a time for putting a band-aid on things and moving on. And then you also have to recognize when, okay, we actually have to fix the problems. We have to look into this a little bit harder. We have to change things for the better going forward so that we don't keep having band-aids and problems. It's just a different approach, and we're in a different time, and knowing where you are in that is so important.
Yeah. There's another phrase that's coming to mind that I always used to say, run fast, break things, right? In the entrepreneur land, run fast, break things. And then somebody said it recently, they're like, no, I love run fast, fix things.
Yes.
And so I think even today, I would add something even in that step. It's like run fast, but take breaks. Like, take that outside of the speed of everything for a day, whatever you can afford to actually sit down. And now I will tell you, you and I both know discomfort is the price of your dreams. A lot of us don't want to sit down and plan. It's not the sexy work. The brainstorming, lots of dopamine, super fun, figuring out, brainstorming, coming up with solutions, executing, also a dopamine release, like get stuff done. Ooh, check off the list. So we got these like awesome hormones and the bookends, but that planning can just feel like a drudgery. And I'm like literally hand in the air, just wrote this down in my own planning session. Like I truly believe planning is a drudgery, because I have this belief that it's all going to change anyway. Well, but what I can see as a CEO, that's not serving my business. It's not serving my personal life, like planning a trip or whatever. It's not serving the business. So if we can actually sit down and yes, brain dump all the ideas, but actually plan to what you're saying, like your leaders, like sit down next year. That's one leader you said next year they're going to do that. I think if we do that enough, we'll get the dopamine hit from the planning, right? But we have to feel that discomfort to slow down for a moment and really just be like, okay, what are the right people? Who are the right people, and what are the right roles? What does the business actually need right now? And then sometimes you have to make those tough decisions. You've got another type of discomfort that you're facing if you have to let somebody go or, move them again. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like dopamine discomfort, possibly. But you got to take it. You got to take it.
Absolutely. Well, there's the working on your business versus working in your business, kind of same example of what you're talking about. And it's so much easier to work in the business than it is to work on the business. And even if you carve it out in your calendar, it'll be the first block of time that gets bumped for something else. You'll do it in a heartbeat, right? But whether it's your business or the business of yourself and your future and your career, that's how you get to the next level. There's no other way. It's not just going to happen by accident. You have to be in charge of that. Yeah. I love that.
I have a really good, did you want to go somewhere?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Good, recent example of what I feel like I'm seeing in the marketplace, to our point, and maybe that'll put a nice bookend on this. So I have a client who was looking to leave her current employer. She had a peer that was land grabbing, essentially, wasn't staying in his lane, was trying to take on her work and her team's work, not just her work, but her team's work. And she was like, this is not cool. She tried to talk to the CEO, because at the time she was reporting directly to him, got no support. And she was like, all right, well, I'm not going to continue to sit here and not be supported and have this guy get it coming into my lane all the time, and he's not even getting his stuff done, if you will. She's like, I'm going to look externally. So we got together and started getting the resume and the LinkedIn and moving through the clarity of what are you going to be next, etc. Well, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, that guy quits. The peer, the land grabber, he quits. And so it's like, oh my gosh, okay, we have this new exciting chapter in the story. Those choose your own adventure books from when we were kids. I don't know, I might be dating myself, but you get to the end of the chapter and you get to pick where you're going to go.
Yes.
Kind of like I'm in, like they're holding the book and they're choosing and I get to be along for the ride, if you will. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do now? He left. So she was just kind of riding it out. Well, all of a sudden she gets assigned his team. So now she has 3 added people to her team. And now she's going to be reporting, instead of the CEO, to a person in between. So that CEO that wasn't providing her support, now she's got a manager.
Wow.
So what do you do with this? This is like whiplash. Like you're like, all right, I have decided I'm leaving. I'm going to go look externally. And then, like literally in the span of a week, these changes happened.
Amazing.
All while she's still performing her job, right, at a high level. And so it's like, this is what I call a critical juncture, right? Where are you going to go now? How do you take advantage of this? And she's burnt out. She's honestly hurt because she didn't feel helped. And so I said, you have an amazing opportunity in front of you to take advantage of the opportunity. Like there's an opportunity here to let go of the land grabber. Just let the land grabber be the land grabber. He's gone anyway. Take on his team, get a new boss who might actually support you, and like scale your career internally, which a week ago wasn't even an option, or
wasn't even available. Yeah.
Right. Wasn't even available. Or you can say, I'm done, and you can continue to look externally. Those are kind of like the 2 basic options, right?
Right.
That's just, I feel like, a perfect example of how fast things are changing, and structures and organizations and people. And so, yeah, it can be a little bit of a whiplash feeling of like, well, I had my mind set on this and now this is happening. And now what do I do?
Yeah. And you're right. Still make the plan, still move in the directions, because you can make any decision along the way and there's no wrong answer, but you get to be empowered to making those choices for yourself. That's the difference, instead of feeling like everything's happening to you.
I had a question for you on that. How do you empower, because I think you and I are aligned on that with like how we work with our clients, given the school that we came from. So I would love to hear, how do you empower your clients to plan and scale? Because I have thoughts on this too, but I think it'd be cool to hear yours.
How do I
interview you?
I know, my goodness. So your question is how do I empower the leaders to put business plans together, or to do what you're saying?
Take that ownership of hey, things may have changed.
Yes.
Yeah, how do you kind of coach? Because this is truly for us. I have brass tacks, tactical things that I do, update resumes, update LinkedIn profiles. But when we get into the land of empowerment, now we're coaching. Now we're coaching on your thoughts and your feelings and your actions and your results. So I would just be curious how you do that. How do you empower within your program, your leaders, to really take responsibility, ride those waves of change, and scale, maybe?
It's so good. I mean, managing change is basically what being a good leader is, because things are constantly changing. And the only thing that is steady, the only thing you really can control is how you're going to show up. Well, I have basically 6 leadership attributes that I recommend and tell them most people seek in a good leader. So if you want to show up to be the best leader you can be for yourself, for the others around you, how are you going to show up with regard to ranking yourself on these 6 attributes? So if somebody wants an authentic leader, and that is one of them, of the 6, authenticity is one of the biggest ones, right? You can imagine an authentic person is what we would like to see as a leader. I don't know how many of them there are, but you get that opportunity to show up to be that. So in a changing situation, in the pivot, in the new information coming, how are you going to be as authentic, not just to others, but for yourself? How can you live authentically for what you need, what you want, how you want to show up? So that's just one example. But to me, that is the most empowering place to be, is knowing, okay, within these 6 categories, I get to decide who I'm going to be through change, through adversity, through some guy moving into my lane, whatever comes across the board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I talk about in my role, I talk about empowering, like how I empower my clients is they come in and a lot of them, they are in this misaligned place. Like that's probably the number one reason people look for a resume writer, because
Okay.
they think the resume is the problem. They're like, something has changed. I'm no longer aligned. I need help. Like I need first things first, got to get that resume. And so they'll reach out to someone like myself. And then when I meet with them, I actually find out a lot more. Like they think the resume is the problem or like or the solution. And through talking with them in a strategic way, really finding out what their current state is, what their future vision is, and the obstacles that they're anticipating in between, I actually can come in and say, okay, well, the resume is just one part, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Okay.
when they do work with me, I have a whole clarity phase that we move through. We help them figure out what's next by looking back on their past to ask questions like, what really lights you up? Where have you felt most fulfilled in your career? We look for actual evidence. So it's like proof, right? That's like a soft pitch from a neuroscience perspective. It's a soft pitch to the brain to look back to the past.
Right.
And then we look to the future, which is a little harder. You're stepping into that prefrontal cortex and you're imagining, right? What do you want your future to look like? So that's kind of the first exercise. But then from there, I actually have them come up with a list of 15 things they want from their next role and their next direct manager. And then I have them pick 5, rank those 5 in number of, priority, and then have them come up with interview questions that support those 5 wants or 5 priorities.
Beautiful.
And so when I'm working with clients, the way that I say that I empower them is no longer are they selling themselves to the hiring manager, like, please, please hire me, right? Let me sell, which nobody likes doing. You actually are coming in with that kind of like boss energy, if you will. And you're like, no, I've spent the time to sit down. I sat in discomfort and figured out what I wanted, the top 5 aspects that I wanted from the role and the manager. I got questions for you. You have to sell me. And so instead of me selling like this, it levels the playing field and they're selling to my client. And then my client has all this confidence and this energy, this swagger, and they're like, look, it's not the right fit.
Yeah.
What a beautiful position to be in.
Yes. Here's what I'm going to offer this conversation, because I think it's so valuable, because I'm going to go backwards to the example you just gave a few minutes ago. When you are coaching somebody with that level of swagger and that level of confidence and empowerment, they show up to their current job differently too. And sometimes that's why they're getting offers for promotions or offers to take over a team or additional support that they need, because they're bringing themselves differently to the whole world, not just to the new interview process. So it's such an incredible opportunity for them to even open themselves up to all that's available to them.
Yeah. I think for your clients, it could be like, what do I want if they're internal and they're developing? Like, what do I want to develop? You might be told like, hey, via 360 or some other assessment, here's your strengths, here's your weaknesses. Research shows, this came out of Korn Ferry, I believe, that if a leader focuses on their top 3 strengths, whatever they're responsible for increases by 48%. Like it's a multiplier versus focusing on your weaknesses. So even if you pick like, hey, these are my top 3 strengths, I know and I want to develop those, and that becomes your priority, there's a sense of confidence and swagger that comes with knowing what you want. And then also, I think what it sounds like you're defining with these top 6 leadership traits of like, who also do I want to be? So it's like the who do I want to be and what do I want to be doing? And when you are so clear on that, it radiates. It's a wonderful mindset. It's a wonderful feeling. And that comes out of you. You bring that to work and things do you become influential and things start to change around you.
And you create your own destiny from that.
Yeah. I mean, you really can, because it's all about desire. It's all about want, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, life is also going to happen. Life might throw you some curveballs and you get to those, like we were talking, those critical junctures. And that's when those are opportunities to reevaluate. Do I still want this or do I want this? And so there is like with planning, we get structure, we give ourselves structure. and something to ground ourselves with. And that's where I think the confidence comes from. But then there's circumstances that change. And again, it's just like, it's friction that maybe test those goals, test those desires and those wants to be like, okay, do you really want this still? Or do you want to move in a different direction? So I kind of like this idea of both structure and kind of like that flow, if you will. I don't know, lack of a better term.
Willing to trust, sort of have some trust in the universe too. It's a little bit of both. Like, I'm going to create it and I'm going to trust that the things that come to me are the things that I created.
Yeah.
And to listen to them and follow those. Yeah, that's great. I love that we went down that road, because one of my questions was going to be sort of, what are the tips you give people to make sure that it's the right time for them and that they're leaving for the right reasons? Like, sometimes in the way I kind of coach people is, before you make a decision to leave, make sure that you've investigated all the ways to really be satisfied with your career right where you are, because you might be leaving circumstances that might then exist in the next place too. So how do you properly prepare people for that?
Yeah. Well, a couple things, and this might answer your question in a roundabout way, but here's what's coming to mind. So a lot of times I'll do an initial meet and greet with a client before, like, I meet with every single client before I work with them, because we have to make sure that we have to do a vibe check.
Yes.
As Gen Z peeps would say, we got to check those vibes, make sure those vibes are right. And then
well said.
Right. It's vibes. I would say it's vibes and it's value. They've got to see value in what I'm offering. But then the last two things are logistical. It's the right time for them. And then they've got the money right to invest. They're ready to invest.
Yeah.
But that timing piece is huge. Yeah. I have had conversations with people like here. I had a client met with him in March. He's like, I set up a free meet and greet with you. And then I got a job, but I didn't want to cancel. I thought it would just be nice to connect and whatever. We had some mutual connections and whatnot. Stand up dude, right? Like, had a great conversation, wished him well. 6 months later, he contacts me and he's like, I can't do it here. I've got to leave. Right. So it is about right timing. Sometimes I have to kind of let the birdies go out of the nest, or it's not the right time to welcome them into the nest. I call it the Jamie Flora laboratory. I'm like the mad scientist, come in, we're going to reinvent you. What do you want? Not like total reinvent, but maybe elevate. We're going to elevate you for your next role. So it's not time for them to come into the laboratory. And so they go out and they kind of do their own thing and they experiment and they test. And then they come back and say, okay, now it's time. Now it's time. I really want to take a good hard look at myself or at my resume, my experience, and what's like giving me purpose. And then we work together. So that's an example on timing. But then once they're with me, like, and we're in the laboratory, if you will, and we're working together, I think a lot of this really comes out through conversation. I think also you and I as coaches, we get to know our clients really well and we watch them. We are trained watchers, observers, right? We are the mirror that we're holding up for our clients to say, okay, I'm seeing this. And so it's watching them and then also validating, I think in a way through that, how we observe them, we can validate what's going on in their own mind. Sometimes they just need to hear that of like, hey, I keep hearing you say this, are you sensing that it's not the right time to move in this direction? Or is it the right time to push a little deeper and ask for that promotion and that salary raise? Or is it time to do things completely different? Maybe you've been going for that raise on your own and you just like keep hitting a brick wall, but then you get with somebody else, a coach who always provides perspective. Like that is our job, is to provide perspective and say, hey, maybe here's another way to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can walk away when we get it done for them, right? They show up, you know what I mean? It's a wonderful partnership. But yeah, I think
totally
for sure all of that happens. And I think the theme there is it happens in conversation. Helping people know when it's the right time happens in conversation, whether that's with an expert coach or a spouse or a good friend. I would say get with your people because they're watching you. They can see you. If you're not tuned in, you know what I mean, fully, or maybe ready to admit that it's the right time or not the right time. I think that can happen in community. And I think that's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah. I love that advice. And because it does come down to timing and really in order for them to be properly prepared for the next interview process to even making those decisions for themselves, they have to have that centeredness, I would imagine, before even going through to the next level
Yeah.
with that process. Yeah.
So I like have on my, when somebody meets with me, I send them a PDF afterwards and it kind of shows all the service options. But the very first slide is, and this is like my banner, it's like, I help you reduce overwhelm, anxiety, fear, whatever you're feeling about getting your next job or just your career journey. Like, come on in and let's reduce that first. Like, let's calm basically the parasympathetic nervous system. Like, you're probably near or in some stage of fight or flight, right? So let's kind of calm that down. So like you just said beautifully, we can get centered. Because if we don't do that kind of like grounding, look back at the past, look to the future, what do you really want? Those types of exercises, these are the people who are just willy-nilly applying for jobs, whether internally or externally. You know, they're just like throwing their hat in the ring. They're probably not customizing their resume. They're just like, it's like the spray and pray approach, they call it, right?
Yes.
Which can be effective. It can be, that can, like, you could have a career with that approach. But what I've found is having a more strategic approach where you do slow down, like going back to the beginning of our conversation, and you plan and you ask yourself maybe some uncomfortable questions about what you want.
Yeah.
And then you move forward with that plan, again, allowing room for life to happen, circumstances to change, but you move forward with that. That to me is where I see success, and just a success from a much less frenetic place.
Yes. Yes. Totally. I've had way too many people come to me after they've already quit a job while in overwhelm, burnout, all the things, and in a mental state where they don't know where to begin, which is why they called me.
Right.
But they needed me before that.
It's all the things the coaches know, right? Like, yeah, exactly.
Yes, yes. So, Jamie, one of the questions that I wanted to ask you that I feel like you answered, but I want to make sure we're not missing anything, is what kinds of things do you advise your clients to be aware of during an interview process and when making decisions about where to go work? How do you help them make sure that they're going to land in the right place for them, that there is an alignment going forward?
Yeah, I think it goes back to those worksheets that I was talking about getting really clear about what you want. And here's a tip for everybody. This is so amazing. Okay. So if you sit down, anybody who's watching this podcast, you can simply just ask yourself, what do I want from my next role? What do I want from my next direct manager, right? Because your people can do this. People who are watching this, who are part of your program, can do this internally. You can do this internally or externally. You get your list. You pick 5, you rank those 5. Now that you've ranked those 5, you get specific. A lot of people say, okay, for my next role, I want work-life balance. Okay, well, that means 500 million different things to 500 million different people. What does that mean to you? So now you define, you almost do like work-life balance equals, and then you define it for you, which is super fun, right?
Yes.
And then you take that, everything after that equal symbol, and you go over to ChatGPT. All right. If you haven't, folks, signed up for ChatGPT, just go play with it, right?
Yeah.
Sign up,
Have fun.
put in, so you take that, everything like your definition of work-life balance, you put that into ChatGPT and you can say, I define work-life balance as this, paste your definition, period. What's a question I could ask a hiring manager to understand if the company promotes, like how the company basically, what would we say, promotes work-life balance, handles it, provides, whatever verb you want in there. So but the key thing is, what's a question I can ask a hiring manager even about this? ChatGPT is going to give you like 5 to 10 questions that you can ask. And so you do that for all of your top 5, and you just sift through and pick, and let ChatGPT do some of that like harder brainstorming work for you. Yes. You can pull out the questions that you love the most. You put that on with your list of 5 things. And now this is how you advocate for yourself. This is how you empower yourself, is coming up with those wonderful questions, and to have like to basically, like you do, embolden yourself in a way to say, look, I want these things. I'm going to ask for these things. I don't think a lot of us are used to asking for what we want. And it could be like a cultural, like depending on where you are in the US or the world, like it could, maybe there's some cultures that are better at than others. But I think generally speaking, a lot of people don't ask for what they want and really get specific about what they want and then ask for it. So that is just, again, it's so empowering. You are going to guarantee that you are now aligned with your next role and or even your next manager. It's so cool.
Love that tip so much. That is so good and so empowering. And it makes me remember that, I'll add on to that many times people are afraid to ask for what they want because they want to get the job and they feel like they're still in, I got to sell myself mode, right? So I'm not going to ask for a lot of things. I need to get in there first. But that's the opposite of what you're suggesting. But more importantly, what I tell employers in their hiring is you should be talking about all the great things you do because so many other companies aren't doing them. And if they were valuable to you to do, and if they were valuable and important for you to incorporate in your company, you are going to attract more people by talking about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you assume it's not a big deal that you always get out of work at 4:00 on Fridays and do this or whatever the small things are. But it is a big deal to many, many people. And they're making these lists all the time with what they're looking for and what they might be afraid to ask for. So, it's a message to employees who are looking for the right place, and it's also a message to employers to talk about how great it is to be there. What are the special benefits? What makes them unique? Why is their culture so great? Because many times that's how you find the alignment. To talk about it.
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking about this from the employer perspective. From the employee perspective, we are I've trained my clients to customize everything. You customize everything. You customize your resume. The LinkedIn kind of stays general. You keep it foundational for the most part, because that's a little bit more evergreen, if you will, but you customize your resume for every job description, every application.
Right.
You customize your interview talking points and your stories for that. But it could be interesting, like if there was a manager who was like, I am really looking for this person. And again, if the playing field is leveled a little bit, they should also be customizing. Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great or nice? Wouldn't it be nice? Right? I'm just brainstorming for managers. Like, what if you were to observe the person you're interviewing and through what they're sharing, you pick up on what they value, right? And you start selling, like the managers start selling as much as the employees are selling. I think that's where you can have a really nice match.
That's where the beautiful magic happens.
Yes. That's what I'm saying. This is like, I don't know if this is pie in the sky, but I think there might be something there, because how many managers do you know that are having a hard time finding the right help? And maybe they're just not selling. I think we have moved into culturally, I think we have shifted post-COVID where people were stuck at home, faced with all their issues and all their wants and all their desires. And I think for a lot of people that crystallized what they wanted out of life. Yeah. And so they already, just through that experience, if they're not doing this kind of like defining their top 5 wants that I've suggested, I think that even came out of that. And so, it might be harder to hire an employee. So I think maybe we're shifting into a cultural thing where hiring managers do need to kind of advertise a little bit and sell a little bit.
Yeah. Talk about it. And you're giving me an opportunity to pitch for a second, but
do it.
One of the things I teach all the time is that all of us fall into one of 6 performance motivators. And that is our emotional motivation for why we're working where we're working in this season of our lives. So it could change. Like when you were 25, it's very different than when you're 35 or 45 or 55. If you're working, why you choose to work where you work. Because my whole point is, it isn't about the money. You're going to get paid money for working. Company A or company B are going to pay you to work there. But then what? Why will you choose that? So I am training constantly hiring managers to be able to recognize what these employees are motivated by so that you can speak their language, so that you can show them how you as a company meet their emotional need of what they drive and strive to achieve in a position to attract the best talent. So yes, and if Jamie and I could make the perfect world of hiring and interviewing, that's what it would be. We just created it.
Yep. Boom. Done. You're welcome. And I think to this whole point, this discussion that we're talking about, the manager is already by nature, it must happen. They're bringing in interview questions. And this is what I always tell my clients. You watch and write down, if you can, the questions that they're asking you, or at least the subject or the topic of that question. You write that down because that shows their need. So it's kind of funny to me because I feel like a lot of hiring managers and you go into interviews with like, oh, I'm gonna like be a little like keep the cards close to the chest kind of thing.
Right. Oh yeah. It's a big secret. It's a big secret.
Right. Like I'm gonna come in kind of guarded a little bit and I'm gonna ask you all the questions and put you in the hot seat, so to speak. But like it's kind of funny because every single question you ask as a hiring manager gives away your needs and your gaps and what you need to fill right now. Okay. So I tell my clients this, so like they're giving it away, you can give it away too when you get clear on your top 5 wants and what you need as a human in the world, right? Or for your family or whatever. And you ask questions based on that, you're also showing your hand. So everybody's really showing their hands, right? So maybe in a way, I am creating more of a selling scenario by advocating and teaching my clients to come in with these questions. Again, like, let's level that playing field. You don't have to be like, please hire me all the time.
Right.
So that's a lot of pressure too. A lot of people feel this, a lot of clients feel this pressure to perform and be perfect and articulate and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I don't think you have to. You can tell your stories, but ask your questions.
And I think it comes back down to authenticity. Nobody wants to work for a company that isn't aligned with what they need in their value system. And it doesn't work for the company either. They spend a lot of money and a lot of time to hire someone who, if they gave them a sales pitch, that's not going to work long-term either if it was just a sales pitch that isn't authentic behind it. So everyone really being authentic to what and honest and really to your point, taking a step back and really recognizing what you need first and what you want first before showing up is what's going to set everybody else up for success. That's a win for everybody. That's the magic, right?
Yeah. I think it also reduces inflation, if you will, inflation of like what you're willing to do, inflation of your skills, because we know this happens a lot in an interviewing scenario. That, I mean, I've experienced as a hiring manager, I've seen it with other people trying to sell me. It's always inflated, like bigger and better. The way that I operate, and maybe it's just because I'm a resume writer, is like we have to be truthful and we have to be clear and we have to be transparent. And also like just in my personal life, as a speaker, as a friend, I'm like, I'm very transparent. I feel like it speeds things up. You get to know somebody faster. You know where I'm at, right? Like all the time. Like, and if we could be doing this in these scenarios, like looking at more as like, again, 2 peers or 2 people, obviously there's a hiring manager, but 2 humans coming together and trying to see if this is a match versus like a selling scenario, right?
Yeah.
I think that can almost reduce the hyperbole that might come with the selling scenario. Yeah.
We're not going to waste anybody's time. Right. So much more efficient.
I use the analogy of or whatever metaphor, and I can never get those right, which is which. So forgive me, all listeners and watchers, forgive me. Maybe you can write me an email and tell me. But I'll go with the word analogy of dating, looking for your next job, again, whether internally or externally, and even for your hiring managers and for the people who are looking, it's a lot like dating. And if you can look at it as a date, and again, it's 2 humans coming together, making sure that there's a match versus a hiring manager, like lording over this employee. I'm telling you as a hiring manager, because you all know as hiring managers, you want a match there, because if you have the wrong person, it's turmoil for you, right?
Totally,
so totally. Come in with a little bit more humility as hiring managers saying, okay, this is a person who has needs and desires and wants. Is this the right role for them? Is this the right company? Is this a match? Can we all just kind of be honest about that up front?
Yeah, absolutely.
In turmoil. There's my tea. T alliteration for the day.
It's so interesting because your job is to help people find the right position for them at the right company for them that is aligned for them and meets their values and priorities in life. And my job as helping coaching leaders is helping them create the exact same thing. So if this advice is coming from both sides, if the more and more people we can influence in this way, the higher quality these relationships can become. So if people can follow that and go into that open-minded and willing to maybe change the way you've done it in the past, the results can be so much more powerful than what you've maybe seen before. Yeah.
You said a phrase called speak your language, speak their language. And I use that a ton. I feel like I've even done a post with that, like in huge writing, like speak their language. And so I train people, candidates, to speak the language of the employer. But I think what we're getting at today is like, could that even employer watch that individual and say, okay, hey, Sally maybe has like 3 little kids, is going to need that flexibility. Can I speak to her about how awesome our company or even me as a manager is about that? Like how I give trust, like you're going to come in, I'm going to hire you for the expert that you are. I give that trust. I give that leeway to get your work done. And that's just, that's going to make her feel seen. Feeling seen is huge. I feel like it's like the number one human desire to feel known, seen, and heard.
Yes.
And so if we can do that, like from both seats, whether the hiring manager or the candidate, I think, again, we've got what we're talking about, like nirvana, heaven, whatever. We've got this,
right.
State that we can reach. But yeah, it can be a really lovely experience. The hiring process doesn't have to be a drudgery. The onboarding, I was even thinking about you too, because you work with a lot of leaders about onboarding and how a lot of people might dread onboarding. That can be a really lovely experience as well. I think it's all just mindset. What are our thoughts about it and how are we approaching it?
88% of people say they are not being onboarded properly at their companies.
Wow.
88%. The good news is that is not a hard statistic to start living into and be quickly. Like think about it. If 88% of people are not being onboarded, then you have an opportunity as a company to actually do this right and really stand out amongst the competition. So come
we call that low-hanging fruit. Right? But I wonder, do 88% of managers not like onboarding? It would be fun to see if that statistic exists,
Exactly. And within the first 3 months, I think it's like 62% of people are already back out looking for other opportunities because of that statistic. So this is such an easy fix to correct. Yeah, such an easy fix. So much opportunity.
Let's give some people, we're saying this is an easy fix. As coaches and experts in this field, what do we see as a solution to that?
Yes. Well, I think the first one is that people believe that onboarding is training them for a week to show them where things are, how to find stuff, and what the basics of the job are, and then let them go and figure it out and not recognize how to define, how do we define onboarding? Onboarding is back to, I love that you said known, seen, and heard. How do you make sure people are known, seen, and heard quickly and they feel like they belong? That's number one. If we just start there, we've already accomplished so much more than what most companies attempt to do.
Mm-hmm. I was actually going to bring that up too. The onboarding process needs to be a known, seen, heard. I feel like this really came from a song that I found recently called Known, Seen, Love by Mariah, Mariah, but with an O, Mariah. And I was and I was thinking about our podcast today and I was I love this song for me, personally right now in the season of life. And I'm this is what it's about. She's got these lyrics where she's I thought I wanted power. I thought I wanted justice. I thought I wanted answers, but what I really needed was to be known, seen, loved. And I'm I really feel like this is for my, the people who work for me, my coaches, my business support team, for your leaders and who work for them, vice versa. And you even look up, it's all about being known, seen, and what I think is heard / appreciated, / respected. that appreciated, heard, respected. I think those are all kind of in a way synonymous, right?
Oh, good.
Seen, heard. And so in the onboarding process, what this could look like, a manager, again, if they just kind of like hate onboarding or training and developing, working on those thoughts, becoming number one through coaching, aware of those thoughts and really honest with yourself of what feeling those thoughts create, what actions or inaction are those thoughts and feelings creating. Because a lot of time, if you're not liking something, you're not doing something. And then the result for you is you haven't successfully onboarded someone, but there's another result because there's another human involved. They're out there like floundering or whatever. So if you can come in with a level of awareness of like, maybe I don't like this. Okay, is there a thought that maybe feels a little bit more neutral? And then could even shift you more and see like, how does that neutral thought feel? How are you going to behave with that? What results do you get with that? And you can keep kind of inching your way towards something really, truly magical. So talking about tactical, like brass tacks, I just onboarded a new executive assistant and I'm in this phase where I'm like, I want people to get the best of me. Like no longer is it like me hustling and getting the business up and running. Now we're at this like flourishing place. And I'm like, when people come in, I want it to be beautiful right from the beginning, not like, hey, it's crazy, we're scaling, get on we're going, kind of thing. Like, no, I want this to be a beautiful experience for her. So, I would make a note like on Monday mornings to check in with her to truly ask, how are you feeling? Like, what do you think? What are you feeling? Get those feels out there. And maybe that's, I don't know, more in the like female to female relationship, but I think everybody's got feelings, whether we acknowledge them or not. How are you feeling? And what do you need? How are you feeling about how last week went? How are you feeling about going into this week? What do you feel like you need? Just asking those open-ended questions allows that person to feel known, seen, and heard.
Yes. And I'm going to add from there, which I know you already do, but for those listening, it's really important to then listen.
Yeah. Like the response, respond to the need, right? Yeah.
Listen to what they say, try to understand, be curious, be open-minded, just listen.
Well, because aren't they the best people to like improve processes, create efficiencies, automation? Like they're bringing so much value, like from that perspective. And then again, you keep checking in with them like that. And like, how do you not feel, honestly, like set professionalism aside, how do you not kind of feel loved? How do you not feel respected and like honored as a human and that you're filling this role? Like you are bringing them in to fill a space and provide a service or, whatever, some type of work to get things done. Yes. But wow, when you get both the delivery of the role and the human feeling like they are known, seen, and heard, like that's when you have magical teams.
Totally. And I love that you talked about ChatGPT and AI, and not that we're going to go down that road tremendously, but I love that you brought it up because I think there's so much value in it. And I love your tips there. But there are some things that ChatGPT and AI can't do. Maybe not yet, maybe someday that will change, but that is truly, genuinely, and authentically making sure people are known, seen, and heard. And that is something that is a beautiful human trait that we can't forget. It's very available to us. And in this society and in this world, it gets lost and it gets forgotten easily, but it's not really that hard to just rein that back in and bring it back in. Yeah. Yeah, me too. Okay. So my question for you to help my leaders, my companies become the best they can be right now, what is the advice that you would have to give them that would help them attract and retain this great talent who have decided they want to be out and looking again and they're seeking the right place? What are the consistent themes? What is the advice you have to give them?
Yeah, I feel like it goes back to the known, seen, heard. So in the interview process, when you're looking, because I even have clients of mine who are looking to backfill roles, like they don't have successors, to their roles. And that is really hard to fill. So for one client, for example, she has 3,000 people in her organization and she doesn't have someone to back her up. And that's a really big role not to have a successor. And so what is she doing? She's going out, back to our earlier part of our conversation, she's going out and she's having conversations. She's meeting with someone who she thinks could be her successor. She's actually asking him out of humility, who do you know? Who's maybe even a level below? And like really starting to like start with one person. All it takes is one person to have that conversation and like drive that deeper. So again, even in that conversation, there's the known, seen, heard. In interviews, finding the right candidate, the known, seen, heard, I think goes back to what we were talking about of like, could you be, oh gosh, I was just watching this show. I can't remember what it was. And yeah, it was The Bear. Okay. So The Bear is a new show. It's about a chef. And one of the characters leaves this kind of hole in the wall restaurant to go to a really fancy restaurant and train. And what he learns while he's at this really fancy restaurant is that this really fancy restaurant, the people there do research on all of their guests. They literally have a waiting list 1,000,000 miles long, right? To get in this.
Wow.
And they go to their Instagram, they see whatever. Now, I'm not saying that every hiring manager has to do this with every candidate, but what information, like what time do you have? And within the time and the information that you have, what can you do to know the person that you're interviewing ahead of time? And then ask the questions that you need to ask for the role, but then maybe also leave space for like, maybe even prompt that candidate, like, what do you need to say yes to a role? If you've got a candidate you really want, what do they need to say yes? I don't know if that's bad negotiations.
Love it.
Like, you know, I don't know, but like, yeah, I think it would be maybe it's not even asking that question because that might be bad. Again, you know, we want to keep leverage in those scenarios balanced, but really watching that person and knowing that person and seeing, okay, I can see, again, using the example of Sally, who has 3 small kids, you come out right out with it and say, hey, by the way, I'm not sure if anybody told you about this yet, but we roll like this around here when it comes to work-life balance, or this is how I operate. And I think some of that stuff will come out, you know. One of my best clients who gets interviews like nobody's business. I've said to so many people, I put her under a microscope and I study her. I'm like, how do you get so many interviews? And she is this master networker via email of all things. And what she does is she says she listens for the first thing that people talk about. Do they talk about their kids? Do they talk about their pet? Do they talk about a sport or something they're involved in? And she makes note of that. And she always validates that. And so I think hiring managers can probably do the same thing. Oh, okay. I heard him talk about, you know, his mother is aging and or something like that, or he had this appointment. And say, oh, hey, did anybody tell you about this kind of maybe like what is it called now? Like parental leave for like aging parents?
Right.
Yeah. Did anybody tell you about that? I think there's ways that, again, as a hiring manager, you can connect with that candidate to make them feel known, seen, and maybe heard.
Such good advice. And so, I mean, you and I, obviously, we think a lot alike. We have passion for, you know, people being successful at work and for those relationships to being successful. So it makes us very passionate toward creating those kinds of environments, which I love. And, you know, I'm just teaching constantly how important rapport building is and really genuinely knowing your people, knowing each other as humans. You are humans before you are business all day long. And I love that you know, are a proponent of that with your clients as they're seeking their next best situation. It's amazing. I love that. Yeah.
One last tip. Let's take it from Michael Scott in The Office. Okay, let's just like, come on, let's just have some fun.
Classic.
I'm pretty sure, didn't he have a Rolodex where he had like acronyms of like attributes of people? So he had this whole like system that he would keep to remember specific things about people so he could relate to them. I feel like
I'm not sure his examples were good ones, but
I know I think but like let's do it better.
The theory is a good one. Yeah, exactly. Yes, I totally love that. Well, as you mentioned, we're in summer, and at least here in Strive, we're jumping into hiring and retention for the next 2 months. That is sort of our focus. So your timing couldn't be more perfect in terms of talking about all that with my team. But I thank you so much for being here because you're doing amazing things. You're helping people find their best new path and journey on their career. And I know you're passionate about it. And if somebody wants to find you, how do they find Jamie Flora and Associates?
Yes. So you can find us just simply at jamieflora.com. Or I highly, highly recommend if you want to get in touch, I am on LinkedIn all day, every day. And I'm Jamie Flora. If you can't find me, the URL is, linkedin.com/JamieFlora1. And you can find me there and connect with me and be happy to have a chat.
I love it. I love that you came on and I love everything you shared. Such great tips. And I know these listeners are going to be so appreciative of these. I know I am. I learned a lot of new things today. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you for having me. It's always a blast.
We'll keep having you back on again because you're so amazing. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. Till next time.
Till next time.
If this podcast helped you, we'd love for you to subscribe and share with a friend who's a work in progress too.